and the communication structure in the organizations. So, talking about the introduction phase about this organizational communication structure, we have the organizational communication structure according to the formal and informal structure. According to expression, it is the oral and written structure. According to the direction, we are having this downward communication, upward communication, and the horizontal communication. So, let us discuss about the the relevance of the organizational communication. And the communication skills constitute an important aspect of effective management. Yes, when we are talking about the management of people, management of this communication system from this upward or downward or the horizontal. So, management is not an easy task, it is a very complex process. So, management determines the certain objectives and goals to achieve, but we need effective communication system in the organization to achieve those objectives well defined in the organizations. But how communication is used by the managers, that is the important concern. So, management is the unified, organized and cooperative system fulfilling to achieve the common goals, and it is very much required that there must be a unity of command, and it is only fulfilled and persuaded through the power of communication. For this purpose, the managers should have the excellent communication skills. So, a manager should be able to create the desired relationship with the audience or the employees to produce the desired results, because everything is matters about the results whenever we are talking about achieving the objectives and the goals. But without the effective communication, it is very difficult for the managers to achieve those targets and the goals. So, diverse strategies including verbal and non-verbal communication form an important part for the managers in the organization. From a small business to large business, every organization today needs an effective communication system to function well. So, an effective communication system is very important for the better management system. If we want to accelerate the pace of our expansion of our organization, we need the effective communication system, and the role of managers in the case of communicating with the employees and the employers is very much important. Communication helps the manager in the following ways. It creates the sense of belongingness, it helps to resolve the disputes, it provides the holistic view of the situation. Yes, when we are talking about the creation of sense of belongingness, it is very important, because without communication you cannot create the sense of belongingness among your employees, among your peer groups, among the different departments. Yes, that is an important factor when we are talking about the creation of sense of belongingness. As far as the resolving disputes are concerned, in the organization we have a diverse nature of people, right, and their minds are altogether different. In some way they are having the disputes on the some aspects. So, to resolve the disputes, it is very necessary for the managers that they have to communicate well and try to resolve all the disputes between the employees. On the other hand, this effective organizational communication requires the holistic view of the situation. Yes, it is only by the communication we can realize and we can provide the holistic view of the situation. It helps the managers to understand well, right, to take the appropriate decisions after analyzing the things in the effective manners. So, in the changing business environment of the globalization, communication has become an important component of an organization, and with the prevalence of this modern technology era of information, which has made people pay more attention to communication now, and it is an important tool of management. and the following are the changes why communication is the important part of the organization nowadays. As you know that the size of the organizations increases day by day as expansion plans are done by the companies nowadays, and the diversifications are done by the companies, but it needs the effective communication system, effective channel of communication system in the organization. So without it we cannot achieve the objectives of the organization. As the sizes increases, we must be very particular about the communication system. Second, we have this new development in the information technology, as we have already discussed many things about the communication channels in our previous sessions, in our previous discussions also. Information technology is a revolution nowadays, and many platforms are being used by the companies. If I am talking about the social media, if I am talking about the email, if I am talking about the WhatsApp business, so in every aspect we need a very good communication system, either the oral communication or the written communication, upward communication, the downward communication, or the horizontal communication. But besides that, we have very important aspect, the concept of human capital. We cannot forget about the human resources. Yes, human resources are the backbone of any company. Technology is creating the differences in the expansion of the businesses, but human resources are the the great asset in the case of managing and maintaining the decorum of the company, and the communication helps to engage all the human resources in an appropriate and effective way. And to learn the corporate etiquette, it is very much required that you must have a very good communication skills, because that requires this very good effective way of language, expressions, right, gestures, the postures, right. Etiquettes are very much required in the case of this effective communication system, and it is the part and parcel of every manager in the organization now. So a manager has to spend most of her time to speak and write to their colleagues, supervisors, subordinates, or the customers and the clients, and the success will depend on his or her ability to communicate what is to be done and why to the colleagues. So the manager has to devote her time on what? They have to receive and analyze information from other managers and departments. Yes, that is an important concern. They have to send information to other departments, managers in every day. That is another concern. He or she has to share the information and suggestions on the new plans or projects to the senior top management. That is also the great concern. Then he or she has to transmit information to their subordinates well in time. That is the important factor in the communication system in the organizations. Then developing a positive attitude is the key to the success of every communication system in the organization. So it is very much required for the managers. So the common structure of the communication system in the organizations, as we have already discussed, are as follows. According to the organization structure, we have the formal communication system, and the formal communication system is the communication that flows along the lines of management or authority. Yes, we have a lines of management and authority from top level to the bottom level, and the formal communications are being done from the top to bottom. And formal communication takes the shape of manual forms, reports, and meetings that we will be discussing in the later lectures also, about the report writing, about the business letters, right, how the writings are being done within the organization from the different managers in the departments, right. So this is about the formal communication. Then if I am talking about this formal communication, it is divided into three parts. That is one is the downward communication, or where information moves from higher management to the employees. Second one, we have this upward communication, where information moves from employees to higher management. Third, we have the horizontal communication, where information is shared between the peer groups and the various departmental heads. Now, taking one by one to understand well about these kinds of communication system, this is the example of downward communication, whereby the manager is flowing the message to their supervisor and the supervisor is flowing the message to the worker. That is the great example of this downward communication that appears on your screen. Okay. This is a structure, how the message is flowing from the top management to the lower management people. Okay. So, we have 3 levels of management in the organization: the top level management, middle level management and the lower level management. So, we must be understand about this organizational hierarchy structure also when we are talking about the downward communication and the formal communication. And this is an example of the upward communication. You can see that the message is flowing from lower to top, right. The workers are communicating to their production supervisor, then the production supervisor is communicating to their assistant production manager, then the assistant production manager is communicating to the manager production. That is the example of the upward communication, where the message is flowing from this bottom to top, right. This is the another concern. Then we have the third area, that is example of horizontal, or this we are also calling it the lateral communication, when the communication is done with the peer groups. Yes, if we have a marketing manager in the organization, finance manager in the organization, operations manager in the organization, that means if they are communicating with each other, we are calling it the horizontal communication prevails within the department, and this we are also calling the lateral communication, for your information. But when we are talking about the advantages, disadvantages of the formal communication, we have certain advantages, which is as follows. First is maintenance of authority of officers. Second is the clear and effective communication. Third is orderly flow of information. Fourth is easy knowledge and source of information. Fourth is less errors and mistakes. Next is to maintain the discipline. Next is to maintain the permanent record, and it is more reliable. When we are talking about the maintenance of the authority of officers, because we need to maintain the certain decorum in our organization, so certain written communication is done by the companies, and the certain policies are being defined by the companies, certain rules and regulations are defined by the companies, certain do's and don'ts are defined by the companies, which is followed by everyone in the organization, and that is circulated to everyone in the formal way, and it is a clear and effective communication that appears in the clear crystal pictures and the documentation process, right. And moreover, it requires the orderly flow of the information. We cannot surpass or overrule any designated authority, because the flow of information either from the lower to bottom, this lower to top, or the top to bottom, and it is a great easy knowledge and the source of information. So, these are the certain advantages of formal communication, but there are certain disadvantages of every concern, of every area, every aspect also. If I am talking about the disadvantages of the formal communication, it is time consuming, it has lacks personal touch and involvement, it is rigid and time bound, it is the more expensive. Yes, because it is a time consuming process, because we are running into the system. Suppose I am sharing certain message to my immediate boss, but immediate boss is not sharing the certain message to his or her immediate boss, and we need a quick decision on a certain aspect, on a certain situation. So, in the formal communication, there is a time consuming, right. The time is it's taking more time to reaches to the appropriate decisions, and it's also required this lacking the personal touch and involvement also. It is rigid, right? It is not flexible. Once every policy has been defined in the written form, every rules is defined in the written form, we cannot change it, right? We need to take certain time if we want to change, and it is a time bound process, and moreover it is the expensive process also. Okay. These are the certain disadvantages of formal communication. Then we have the another concern of the informal communication, and informal communication in an organization usually flows through chat and the grapevine. Yes, we are also calling it the grapevine communication, and the grapevine communication is often persist in the organizations and in a daily life also. If I am talking about the gossips, if I am talking about the chats, that are the cases of the informal communication. And the network of formal communication may be adequate to meet the needs of exchanging information within an organization. But when we are talking about the personal touch, when we are talking about the personal interest, organizational communication in a formal way cannot be done. It is only through the informal communication whereby we can exchange our emotions and feelings, etc. Okay. How the grapevine communication occurs. So, the grapevine communication is the informal communication network within an organization, as I already talked about. The grapevine is formed by individuals and groups in an organization. Yes, it is formed by any individual and any the group of people in the organization, and the people in the groups have something in common interest that links them together, and a person can belong to one or more groups. Yes, we have a certain groups constitution in the organizations in the informal way, and the one member can be the member of the several informal groups available in the organization, right. So, if I am talking about the advantages of the informal communication, there are certain advantages. It is the mean of fast and effective communication, yes, and it is free environment communication. It built up the better human relations when we are talking about the feelings and expressions and the emotions. By the means of the informal communication, we can maintain the better relationship in the organizations. It provides the easy solutions of the difficult problems. As I have told you that the formal communications are the time consuming communication process, but in the case of the informal communication, we can easily solve our problems instantly by discussing certain problems with our peer groups, certain these informal group members. So, we can find the solutions immediately, and moreover the major advantage of this informal communication is it is satisfying the social needs of the workers. Yes, the social needs are very much required when we are talking about the informal communication system, because we have certain belongingness by which we are having the certain frequency with the certain people in the organization, and we can share even the most secretive information with him or her. So, that is the advantage of informal communication, which we are not able to do in the formal communication. But again there are certain disadvantages of informal communication as well. So, it can be made up of half truths, yes, distortions or complete falsehoods on the basis of which suboptimal decisions can be made. Yes, what happens sometimes, right, when we are informally communicating something in an organization, that may be the half truth, and that maybe creates the problems in terms of the distortions or complete falsehoods, right. So, negative informations can be shared informally in the organization, especially when we are talking about the trade unions. We have the trade unions in the organization, and there are certain people, those who wants to create the problems between the employer and the employee. So, in this case they are creating such kind of untruthful message and convey to their groups. So, that creates the problems. So, in this way it also having the serious legal implications. So, it can lead to organizational disharmony. It can contribute to a high staff turnover also. Yes, obviously when we are talking about the high staff turnover, due to certain problems and distorted information conveyed to somebody, to the immediate boss about somebody. So, that will also is a problem of the high staff turnover. So, that is the disadvantages of the informal communication. So, let us have a quick look on the differences between the formal and informal communication. As that is very important when we are talking about the examination point of view. That is important that the examiner can ask the question that what is the difference between the formal and the informal communication. So, there are certain bases by which we can segregate those differences, and the bases are, if I am talking about the one origin. Origin of the formal communication is deliberately structured, but in the case of the informal communication it is spontaneous and unstructured, right. That is the one concern on the basis of origin. Second, on the basis of nature, formal communications are well planned, systematic and authorized, but in the case of the informal communication these are unplanned, unsystematic and unauthorized, right. Then taking on the flow side, formal communications are prescribed through chain of command, but in the case of informal communication the flow is unofficial channels, not prescribed. Okay. On the other hand, taking the flexibility part, the formal communications are rigid, but the informal communications are flexible. As far as the authority of concern is concerned, the formal communication is required the official channel, but the informal communication is not requiring any kind of official channel, it is the unofficial. And the purpose, on the basis of purpose, the formal communication is to achieve the organizational objectives or the business objectives, but in the case of the informal communication it is only to satisfy the personal needs and requirements. Taking on the speed factor, right, the formal communication is time taking, but the informal communications are very fast. On the other hand, if I am talking about the accuracy base, the formal communication are more accurate, legal and authentic, but in the case of informal communication it is often distorted, maybe the rumors and the gossips and the different kind of chats informally. Then in the case of the form, the formal communications may be in the form of oral and written, but informal communication is always in the oral form. If I am talking about the source, right, whether the formal communication or the informal communication, the formal communication can be traced because we can understand, we can know that who conveys that particular message, who shares particular information, but in the case of the informal communication we cannot be able to trace the source of the information, right. So, these are the basic differences which you are required to know as far as your examination points of view are concerned. And of course, when we are talking about the certain interviews, you must understand the differences between the formal and informal communication.